But Peter, you are absolutely in position to speak about what you think this is going to look like once we actually return. So give us a little bit of an update.
So, I talked to all of the promoters, that being Top Rank, Matchroom, Lou DiBella, DiBella Entertainment, Golden Boy, because I work with even PBC, because I have fighters that are with all of the promoters, and every promoter is working on a plan to have boxing return when it's safe to return, in a controlled environment with no live audience. Everybody's working on that scenario. I think Top Rank might be looking at something mid to late June. I think Matchroom might be able to even look at something maybe the end of May, maybe mid-June as well. Eddie Hearn did a press conference with one of my fighters yesterday, George Kambosos Jr., who's fighting Lee Selby for the IBF Eliminator. And, you can find that on Twitter, on Matchroom's Twitter. And he even talked about, he said, give me a week or two to be able to give a date. Now that date might be forward looking, maybe the end of the summer, but they are planning on getting up and running. Everybody's looking for a scenario. So what I think is going to happen is, I think in the beginning, we're going to see some smaller shows, maybe 5 fight per show shows. I think we're going to see it in a studio environment where it's just the participants. We're not going to get the big world title fights we're looking for, because promoters just feasibly can't afford to forego a $10 or $15 million gate in order to put on some of these shows. Plus, I think part of those shows, whether it's a Canelo Triple G or a Wilder or a Fury Wilder 3 or a Lomachenko Lopez, or even a Crawford Spence Crawford, however you want to headline that, those have to take place in front of a live audience. Those fights have to take place in front of a full capacity arena. It adds to that excitement. I do think we are going to see a version of boxing similar to how we saw WrestleMania. We're just going to see people in the ring doing their thing. I think it's going to be a little bit strange, but I think we're going to get better fights, because I think what's going to happen is we're going to see some really strong competition, maybe on the lower end of the higher end, if that makes sense. We're not going to get world title fights and eliminators and unifications, but we are going to get some pretty solid fights. And I think that from a competitive standpoint, that's going to really interest boxing fans. The odds makers like BetOnline are going to be putting odds out for those fights. And I think it's going to be sooner than later, with some states looking to create ways where some of these things can happen. But, it's definitely in the works. I mean, this is a daily conversation that literally every promoter is having. No one's sitting back waiting for this to be perfect, because it's not going to be perfect for a while.
Yeah, it's funny, because what it appears, and what it is pretty clear, I think, is that combat sports and things like WWE or whatever are really going to lead the way back to professional sports, live professional sports. It's happening already. For all of the criticism that he gets, and oftentimes deserves, Dana White is going to put on the first live sporting event in the United States. And people can say whatever they want to say, but most people are going to appreciate this event who have any appetite for the UFC. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But one of the things that I'm going to ask Lou for sure, and I'm going to throw out there to you too now, and I've mentioned this to you before, is being really open-minded and trying some different things from a presentation standpoint that maybe you can't or don't even need to do when you have a live audience. Like, I think really one of the things, and I know it's really hard to draw this parallel because the two things are so different, but I think anybody who enjoyed WrestleMania will tell you that the best part of WrestleMania was the heavily produced aspect of the show. The live wrestling, or what seemed to be live wrestling or whatever, was cool and fine, and there were some really good points there. But the highlights were the Firefly Funhouse and the Boneyard match between Undertaker and AJ Styles. And I know I'm losing some people who are not wrestling fans when I'm saying this.
But they need to check it out.
But they need to check it out because I believe that there is something that can be taken from the way WWE presented those things, because the thing of it is their audience is accustomed or had been accustomed to watching live in-ring action. And they had to come up with a way to engage their audience without having that and that fan interaction there. And I think they effectively did that. Now, I don't think you saw those matches.
I did.
Or what? Okay, you saw those. Okay.
I watched them on Fight TV.
Okay, outstanding. So can you tell me, if you can imagine, and I know I may be putting you on the spot here, is there a way that you can imagine they can incorporate some of those elements in a boxing presentation?
Absolutely. So first of all, for the people that haven't seen it, what Brian is saying is it was very theatrical. So, but because wrestling is scripted, there's more control. So they were able to really make a nice theatrical, aesthetic to it, right? And so in boxing, obviously, we don't know this is not scripted, so we don't know what's going to happen. But to your point, I think that they could take more time to really be embedded in the entire fight experience. So, maybe it's trying out new things. Maybe it's literally from the dressing room, the entire warm up, the whole vibe, not just cutting to where you get, all of us in there clapping while the guy's hitting some mitts. I'm talking about the entire process. Right? Like the entire hit the venue in the dressing room, really starting to feel what it's like as these guys are preparing to go to battle. Maybe having somebody embedded ringside, because you don't have any impediments of a live audience. No. You're not going to be in anyone's way. Maybe there's other angles. There's going to be no, like I said, there's just going to be no way that you're blocking anyone's vision. So, maybe there are different camera angles that can be experimented with. Maybe maybe everyone's mic'd up in the corner. Maybe you're really getting a feel for what it's like, a more point of view look at the fight. Whatever that is, maybe you have a chest cam for the cornerman. And so you're literally looking from the cornerman's eyes into the fighter in between rounds. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just going on what you said. I think that if there's a time to experiment that would be acceptable, if it didn't necessarily come out the way that maybe it was envisioned, this would be that time. Because who's going to hold anyone to fault for trying to make something more entertaining?
Yes. I think statistics and analytics is something that this particular time period in this situation could help usher in with boxing. Right now, the only analytics or statistics that we get is punch stat numbers. And I think everybody who knows while we often refer to it, it's a very flawed sort of much less than comprehensive sort of way to judge anything by, right?
But I want to cut you off there.
Yeah.
Because I don't want it to go and then come back to, but look, CompuBox was a great addition to boxing.
Absolutely.
Punch stats, and I know what you mean by this, because believe me, I've always tried to justify a loss by saying, well, he threw more punches or he landed more punches. And that, to your point, when you say flawed, and I want to ask, because I want to make sure I know it's all how you look at it. Because boxing is judged in 3-minute increments, the overall picture of punch stats doesn't really tell why one guy won or didn't win.
Right. That is part of what I'm saying. But the other aspect of what I mean is that the way it's even tabulated literally is someone hitting a button, punch landed, which obviously opens up the door for a human error, all sorts of things, right? Obviously, these people are trained in this specific version of data entry, but at the same token, it's not as official as, say, a machine or some sort of application that is there to encompass all of the things that takes place in the boxing ring to kind of judge who's getting the advantage or not. Because one of the things that we never see is we hear people talk about coming forward. I mean, that was one of the things that Harold Letterman,
Effective aggressiveness.
effective aggressiveness,
Not just aggressiveness, effective aggressiveness.
effective aggressiveness coming forward. If I know the technology exists to gauge how much someone is coming forward in a situation. There's a way to judge. There's a way to analyze it. If you see some of the analytics that are used in other sports, there is a way to, because it's all a program. It's all an algorithm. It's all this technology exists if you give the right engineers the initiative to create it.
Right.
And perhaps this is that situation. This is a situation where you open the door for someone to come in and say, hey, we want to blow this thing out. And from an analytics standpoint, we want to give people more information than they've ever had about watching a fight. And maybe that helps to shape something moving forward. If nothing else, it gives the boxing viewer a different experience than they've ever had. And perhaps it takes your mind off of not having the crowd noise, not having some of the other things that you had. And if nothing else, it's interesting.
Right. But no, you're right. I mean, I think that the idea of experimenting now and trying some things out that, look, it could start a conversation. Hey, what did fans like? What did fans not like? How do we incorporate that moving forward? But just to go back to this whole thing about, coming forward. Mm-hmm. Coming forward in itself means nothing.
Right. No.
You have to be effective.
Absolutely.
So the guy that's coming forward, the guy that's, as people say, making the fight, isn't necessarily going to win rounds if he's not effectively using that aggression.
I mean, almost every single fighter Floyd has ever fought came forward, but they didn't come forward effectively.
Right.
So it's
or he was more effective.
Right. He was more effective. I mean, a lot of guys are coming forward. They're chasing. Now, technically, they're coming forward. So that's what I mean by, if you create something like this, it has to have an algorithm built in that it has to have some sort of way to distinguish what is effective aggressiveness. And people who are not engineers and who don't think about things in that way may say, well, I don't see how you're going to ever determine which one is effective and which one isn't. I would venture to say, I think that if you give the right people the right information and the right leadership and the right guidance, I believe that there is something that could be created that could distinguish between effective aggressiveness and simply just coming forward and not being effective.
Yeah. And I think the UFC is going to have success with their no audience shows, and I'll tell you why.
And I bet you there's going to be a stat increase. Okay,
maybe, right? But what I was going to say is UFC fans have already been conditioned by watching The Ultimate Fighter to enjoy matches that take place in front of no live audience until the finale.
Yeah.
So there have been some great matches throughout the Ultimate Fighter seasons that have literally taken place with no audience.
Well, there's an audience. It's just a very small one. It's they have a stands or bleachers there. Well, the Ultimate Fighter didn't. They kind of have just the fighters around the cage, which is you still get the reaction. Right. You can still hear it. Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, which effectively took the place of the Ultimate Fighter, has a small audience. It's about 50 to 65 people that are
as opposed to 18,000.
As opposed to 18,000.
So they're used to that
experience. Yeah, it's definitely. And then, like I mentioned to you before, fights that are early in the prelims, literally they're on FS1, they're on ESPN, they're on ESPN Plus, and there are way more people watching those early prelim fights than what watches early boxing prelim fights. There's hardly nobody's watching those on television on stream. A larger audience are watching the early UFC fights. So to your point, they are far more accustomed to that. So